Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the massive ship floating in the darkness of space. He had been working as a salvage engineer for 20 years and had seen many broken ships, but nothing like this one. The vessel was huge, at least 3 times bigger than any human warship he knew about. Its metal hull shone with a strange light that seemed to change from silver to gold as their salvage ship moved around it. Captain Linda Hayes stood beside him on the bridge, her eyes wide with amazement. She had called Jake to look at the readings. Their sensors were picking up from the mystery ship. The numbers made no sense at all. The ship seemed to be running on power sources that their computers could not identify. There were no marks or symbols on the hull that matched any known alien, race or human colony. "What do you think, Jake?" Linda asked, her voice quiet with wonder. "Have you ever seen anything like this before?" Jake shook his head slowly. Something about the ship felt familiar to him, like a half-remembered dream that stayed just out of reach when he woke up. A feeling made his skin crawl and his heart beat faster. He had always trusted his gut feelings about ships and machinery, and right now his gut was telling him that this ship was important in ways he could not understand. "We need to board it," Jake said, still staring at the vessel. "I need to see. What is inside that thing?" Linda nodded and gave orders to prepare a boarding party. Jake would lead a small team of engineers and technicians to explore the ship and see if it was worth salvaging. As they suited up in their space gear, Jake could not shake the feeling that the ship was waiting for them, or maybe waiting for him specifically. The approach to the airlock was smooth and easy, their small shuttle attached to the mystery ship, without any problems, and Jake was surprised to find that the airlock was exactly the right size for human equipment. Most alien ships had different sized doors and passages, but this one seemed built for people just like them. When Jake reached out to touch the airlock controls, something strange happened. The door responded to his touch immediately, opening with a soft sound like a sigh of relief. He had not entered any codes or used any override equipment. The ship had simply let them in, as if it recognized him. The corridors inside the ship were like nothing Jake had ever seen before. The walls were lined with crystal tubes that glowed with soft blue light. The air was clean and fresh, which should have been impossible after floating in space for who knows how long. The floors were made of some kind of metal that felt warm. Under their boots, and the ceiling curved above them in smooth arches that seemed to go on forever. Jake's team spread out to take readings and samples, but Jake himself felt drawn deeper into the ship. He followed corridor after corridor, each one leading him toward what felt like the heart of the vessel. His scanner was giving him readings that made no sense. The ship's technology was both very old and incredibly advanced at the same time. It was like finding a Stone Age cave painting done with lasers. Finally, Jake reached what had to be the main engineering section. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows above. In the center of the room hung a massive sphere made of material that seemed to shift and change as he looked at it. Energy fields surrounded the sphere, creating patterns of light that danced and moved like living things. As Jake walked closer to the sphere, something began to happen. The blue light in the crystal tubes grew brighter, and the sphere itself started to glow with warm golden light. Jake felt a tingling sensation in his blood, like electricity running through his veins. The feeling was not painful, but it was so strange that he almost turned and ran back to the shuttle. And the displays around the room began to light up. Text appeared on screens in symbols that hurt Jake's eyes to look at directly. The strange thing was that even though the symbols were painful to see, he somehow understood what they meant. The words formed in his mind as clearly as if someone was speaking to them directly into his thoughts. "Welcome home, child of the void," the text said. "We have been waiting for you to return to us." Jake stumbled backward, his heart pounding. The scanner in his hand was beeping wildly, showing energy readings that were off the charts. The sphere was responding to his presence, growing brighter with each second that passed. He tried to call out to his team, but his voice came out as a whisper. More text appeared on the screens around him. "Do not be afraid, Jake Morrison. You are where you belong. You have come to fix what was broken, but you will find that you are fixing much more than just a ship." The fact that the ship knew his name should have terrified him, but instead Jake felt a strange sense of calm washing over him. The tingling in his blood was getting stronger, and he realized that something inside him was responding to the ship just as much as the ship was responding to him. It was like two pieces of a puzzle finally coming together after being separated for a very long time. Jake reached out and touched one of the control panels. The moment his hand made contact, information began flowing into his mind. Images of stars and planets, of great ships traveling between worlds, of technologies that could reshape reality itself. He saw humans, but not the humans he knew. These people were taller, stronger, and their eyes held knowledge that seemed impossible. The visions lasted only a few seconds, but when they ended, Jake knew that his life had changed forever. This ship was not just some random piece of alien technology. It was connected to him, to his bloodline, to secrets about humanity that had been hidden for thousands of years. He heard Linda's voice calling for him over the radio, asking for a status report. Jake looked around the engineering room more and more, time seeing it with new eyes. The sphere pulsed gently, waiting for him to return. He knew he would be back soon, and when he came back, he would learn the truth about who he really was. Jake could not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the golden sphere and felt the strange tingling in his blood. The ship was calling to him, pulling at something deep inside his mind. He tried to focus on his regular duties, but his hands shook as he worked on routine repairs to their salvage vessel. Linda had ordered the boarding of the mystery ship to continue the next day, but Jake could not wait that long. During the night shift, when most of the crew was sleeping, he made his way back to the shuttle bay. He told himself he was just going to take another look, maybe run a few more scans to understand what they were dealing with. The truth was that Jake felt like he would go crazy if he did not return to that engineering room. The ship was in his thoughts constantly, showing him brief flashes of images and symbols that he almost but not quite understood. It was like trying to remember a word that stayed just on the tip of his tongue. The airlock opened for him again without any codes or keys. Jake walked through the corridors more confidently this time, no longer afraid of the glowing crystals and warm metal floors. The ship felt welcoming, like coming home after a long journey. He realized that he was not wearing his spacesuit this time, but the air was perfectly safe to breathe. When Jake reached the engineering room, the sphere was already glowing softly, as if it had been waiting for him. The control panels around the room lit up as he approached, and this time, Jake did not hesitate. He placed both hands on the nearest panel and let whatever was going to happen just happen. The flow of information into his mind was much stronger. This time, Jake saw the history of the ship, of his people, of truths that had been hidden from humanity for 10,000 years. The images came so fast that his knees gave out and he fell to the floor, but the visions continued. He saw Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This Earth was part of a vast empire that stretched across the galaxy. Humans lived on millions of worlds, traveling between stars as easily as taking a walk down the street. They were not the primitive species struggling to reach nearby planets that Jake had always believed them to be. They were the builders of the galaxy, the ones who had planted life on countless worlds and created technologies that could reshape reality itself. But something had gone wrong. A great war had swept across the galaxy, fought against an enemy so terrible that entire solar systems had been destroyed rather than let them fall into its hands. Jake saw fleets of ships like the one he was standing in, fighting desperately against creatures that seemed to be made of living darkness. The war had been lost, at least partly. The survivors of Jake's people had fled to refuge worlds at the edge of the galaxy, places where they could hide and rebuild. Earth was one of those refuge worlds, chosen because it was so far from the main star routes that the enemy would not think to look there. Over thousands of years, the refugees had forgotten who they really were. They had chosen to forget, burying their memories and their technologies so deeply that their children and grandchildren grew up thinking they were just another primitive species that had evolved on one small world. It was safer that way, safer to be forgotten than to be found by the enemy that had destroyed their empire. But the bloodlines had survived. The genetic patterns that allowed humans to interface with their ancient technology were still there, hidden in the DNA of certain family lines. Jake carried those patterns. He was a descendant of the people who had built ships like this one, who had traveled between the stars when Earth was nothing but a refugee camp. The ship was called Heritage's Dawn, and it had been waiting in the void for someone like Jake to find it. Not just anyone could awaken its systems. It needed someone with the right genetic markers, someone whose blood remembered the old ways, even if their mind had forgotten Dot as the visions continued. Jake felt his body beginning to change. The DNA sequences that had been sleeping in his cells for his entire life were waking up, rewriting themselves according to patterns that were older than human civilization. His brain was growing new connections, his senses were becoming sharper, and his understanding of technology was expanding beyond anything he had thought possible. He could feel the ship around him now, not just as a machine, but as a living thing. The Heritage's Dawn was partially alive, its systems powered by the life force of its crew. It needed humans with awakened bloodlines to function properly, to reach its full potential as more than just a vessel, but as a weapon against the darkness that had destroyed their empire. The enemy was still out there. Jake could sense it now, a growing shadow moving between the stars, consuming entire civilizations and adding their knowledge to its own horrible collection. It had been hunting for the refuge worlds for 10,000 years, and it was getting closer to finding Earth. But Jake was changing, becoming something that could fight back. His enhanced mind could understand and operate technologies that normal humans could not even perceive. The Heritage's Dawn was not just a ship. It was a weapons platform designed specifically to battle the enemy, but it needed a crew of awakened humans to unlock its true power. The problem was that Jake was just one person. The ship needed dozens of crew members with activated bloodlines to function at full capacity. He would have to find others like himself, people who carried the ancient genetic patterns, and help them awaken to their true heritage. But the awakening process was dangerous. Not everyone who had the bloodline markers would survive the transformation. Jake stood up slowly, his legs still shaky from the intensity of the visions. The control panels around him were responding to his thoughts now, showing him displays of information that he understood instinctively. He could see the approach routes to Earth, the defensive capabilities of human space forces, and the timeline for when the enemy would arrive. 2 years, maybe less. The shadow was coming, and Earth's primitive weapons would be useless against it, unless Jake could awaken enough of his people to crew the Heritage's Dawn and any other ancient ships that might be hidden in the dark spaces between stars. He looked around the engineering room one more time, seeing it with eyes that now understood its purpose. This was not just a repair job anymore. This was about saving his species from an enemy that had been hunting them across the galaxy for millennia. Jake Morrison had thought he was fixing a broken ship, but he was actually restoring something much more important. He was bringing his people back to life. The sphere pulsed gently, and Jake knew that it was time to return to his own ship. He had work to do, people to find, and a bloodline to awaken before it was too late. Dr. Amy Carter had been watching Jake Morrison for 3 days, and she was starting to worry about what she was seeing. As the expedition's doctor and scientist, she had run routine blood tests on all crew members after their first contact with the alien ship. Jake's results were impossible to explain with normal medical knowledge. His DNA was changing. Not slowly over time like evolution, but rapidly with new genetic sequences appearing in his cells every day. His brain scans showed increased activity in areas that most humans never used. His blood chemistry was shifting toward something that looked almost but not quite human. Amy found Jake in the observation deck, staring out at the Heritage's dawn as it floated in space near their salvage ship. He looked tired, but also somehow more alert than she had ever seen him before. There was something different about his eyes, a depth of knowledge that had not been there a week ago. "Jake, we need to talk," Amy said, sitting down beside him. "Your medical tests are showing some very strange results. I think that ship is doing something to you." Jake turned to look at her, and Amy felt a chill run down her spine. His eyes were still the same brown color they had always been, but there was something ancient looking back at her through them, something that had seen things she could not imagine. "The ship is not doing anything to me, Amy," Jake said quietly. "It is just helping me remember who I really am." Amy pulled out her tablet and showed Jake the test results. His genetic code was rewriting itself in patterns that followed no known biological rules. New proteins were appearing in his blood that should not exist in any human body. His brain was developing new neural pathways at a rate that should have killed him. "This is not normal, Jake. Whatever that ship is, it is changing you into something that is not human anymore. We need to get you away from it before the changes become permanent." Jake smiled sadly and shook his head. "The changes are already permanent, Amy, and they are not making me less human. They are making me more human than I have ever been before." He stood up and walked to the window, placing his hand against the glass as he looked out at the Heritages. Dawn. The ship seemed to pulse with light in response to his presence, even from this distance. "Let me show you something," Jake said. "Something that will explain everything." Amy followed Jake to his quarters, where he had set up a computer terminal connected to the Heritage's Dawn's database. A screen was showing symbols and images. That hurt Amy's eyes to look at directly, but Jake seemed to read them as easily as a children's book. 10,000 years ago, humans were not the primitive species we think we are today, Jake said, his fingers dancing over controls that Amy could not even see clearly. "We were the architects, the builders of a galactic empire that spanned millions of worlds. We created life, shaped planets, and built technologies that could manipulate the basic forces of reality." The screen showed images of vast cities floating in space, of ships that dwarfed entire planets, of humans who looked like gods walking among the stars. Amy stared at the pictures, trying to process what she was seeing. "But we were not alone in the galaxy," Jake continued, his voice growing darker. "There was another intelligence out there, something that existed only to consume and destroy. We called them the Devourers, and they were everything that we were not. Where we created, they consumed. Where we built, they destroyed. Where we brought life, they brought only emptiness and death." The images on the screen changed, showing creatures of living shadow that seemed to eat light itself. Amy watched in horror as entire solar systems were consumed, their planets stripped bare, and their populations absorbed into the growing mass of the devourer hive mind. "The war lasted for thousands of years," Jake said. "We fought with everything we had, but the Devourers were too strong. They could absorb our technology and use it against us. They could take our people and make them part of their collective consciousness. We were losing, and we knew that if we fell completely, all life in the galaxy would end. Amy saw images of the final battles, desperate fights around dying stars, as the last of the human fleet tried to hold back the advancing darkness. Ships like the Heritage's Dawn fought with weapons that could crack planets, but there were too many enemies and too few defenders. So we made the hardest choice in our history, Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. We abandoned our empire and scattered to the edges of the galaxy. We chose refuge worlds like Earth, places so far from the main star routes that the Devourers would not think to look for us. And we chose to forget who we were, to bury our memories and our technologies so deep that our children would grow up thinking they were just another primitive species. The screen showed Exodus fleets leaving the core worlds, carrying refugees. To distant stars, Earth appeared young and green and empty of intelligent life. The first human settlements looked nothing like the advanced cities Amy had seen earlier. They were simple camps, places where the greatest civilization in Galactic history chose to live like Stone Age primitives in order to survive. It worked for 10,000 years, Jake said. The Devourers searched the galaxy for us, but they never found the refuge worlds. We lived quietly, grew slowly, and forgot our true heritage. But we kept the bloodlines alive, even if we did not understand what they meant. Amy stared at the screen, trying to process everything Jake was telling her. You are saying that humans are not from Earth at all, that we are the descendants of some kind of ancient super-civilization. Not descendants, Jake corrected. We are the same species, the same people. The genetic patterns that let me interface with this ship's systems are in your DNA too, Amy. They are in the DNA of about one person in every 1,000 on Earth, most. People never activate them, but they are there, waiting. The screen changed again, showing star charts with moving markers that made Amy's stomach clench with fear. A massive fleet was moving through space, heading directly toward the Sol system. The ships were wrong somehow, their shapes hurting too. Look at just like the symbols on Jake's screen. They found us, Jake said simply. After 10,000 years of searching, the Devourers have finally located Earth. Their advanced scouts are already in our outer system, and the main fleet will be here within 2 years. Amy looked at the size of the approaching fleet and felt despair wash over her. There had to be thousands of ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest space station. Humanity's entire military could not stop even a small part of that armada. Earth's defenses will not even slow them down, Jake said, reading her thoughts. Our weapons are 10,000 years out of date compared to what the Devourers have absorbed from other civilizations. Unless we can awaken enough people with the bloodline to crew ships like the Heritage's Dawn, our species will be consumed. Just like all the others. Amy turned away from the screen, unable to look at the approaching doom any longer. How many ships like this one are there? I do not know, Jake admitted. The Heritage's Dawn can locate others, but it needs a full crew of awakened humans to reach its maximum sensor range. Right now, I am the only one who has completed the transformation process. Amy looked back at Jake, seeing him with new eyes. He was no longer just the maintenance engineer she had known for years. He was becoming something more, something that carried the heritage of humanity's greatest civilization. But he was also still human, still the man who worried about his friends and his duty to his species. What do you need me to do? Amy asked Jake. Smiled, and for a moment, he looked like his old self again. Help me find others who carry the bloodline. Help me awaken them before it is too late. And help me convince Captain Hayes that we need to prepare for a war that will determine whether humanity survives or joins the endless hunger of the Devourers. Amy nodded, knowing that her life had just changed as completely as Jake's had. The comfortable universe she had known was gone, replaced by something vast and terrible and wonderful. Humanity was not alone in the galaxy, but they were not safe either. The enemy that had destroyed their empire was coming home to finish what? It started 10,000 years ago. Captain Linda Hayes listened to Jake's story with growing amazement and fear. The conference room aboard their salvage ship felt, too, small to contain the enormity of what he was telling her about humanity's hidden past and the approaching devourer. Fleet. Amy had backed up his claims with medical evidence and computer data that seemed impossible but could not be argued with. You are asking me to believe that every human in this fleet might be carrying ancient alien DNA, Linda said, looking at the genetic scan results Amy had compiled, and that some of them can be transformed into something superhuman to crew that ship out there. Not alien DNA, Jake corrected patiently. Human DNA, the original human genetic code from before we fled to Earth. The bloodlines have been preserved in certain family lines for 10,000 years, waiting for the time when we would need to awaken them again. Linda studied the list of crew members that Amy and Jake had identified as potential candidates for the awakening process. The genetic markers were subtle, hidden deep in junk DNA that most scientists ignored. But Jake's enhanced abilities let him read the patterns like a book, identifying people whose bloodlines carried the ancient architect heritage. Ben Parker is at the top of your list, Linda said, pointing to the young pilot's name. What makes you think he will survive this transformation when you said it might kill people? Jake closed his eyes and accessed the Heritage Dawn's database. Through the neural link that was growing stronger every day. Ben's grandmother used to tell him stories about their family coming from the stars. She probably never knew how true those stories were, but the genetic patterns in his bloodline are very strong. His body should adapt to the awakening process. Better than most. Linda made her decision. The approaching devourer fleet was real. Jake's transformation was undeniable, and Earth needed every advantage it could get. Do it. Start with Ben Parker and see what happens. But I want Amy monitoring every step of the process, and if anything goes wrong, we stop immediately. Ben Parker was called to the Heritage's Dawn that evening, told only that Jake needed his help with some experimental technology testing. The young pilot had always been curious about advanced systems, and he followed Jake into the engineering room without hesitation. When he saw the golden sphere and the crystal-lined walls, his eyes went wide with wonder. "What is this place, Jake?" Ben asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I have never seen technology like this before." "Touch the control panel," Jake said gently. "Let the ship scan your genetic patterns. It will not hurt you, but it needs to confirm that you carry the bloodline before we can proceed." Ben placed his hand on the glowing surface, and immediately the room responded. The crystal conduits brightened, the sphere pulsed with warm light, and symbols appeared on screens around them. Jake watched the readings carefully, his enhanced vision letting him see details that normal human eyes would miss. "Your bloodline is strong," Jake said with relief. "The ship recognizes you as one of its intended crew. But Ben, I need to tell you what will happen next before you decide whether to continue." Jake explained about the ancient war, about humanity's hidden heritage, and about the transformation process that would awaken Ben's dormant genetic abilities. He told him about the dangers, about the possibility that his body might reject the changes and leave him in a coma like Jake had seen happen to others. Ben listened to everything without interruption, his face growing more serious as he understood the weight of what was being offered to him. When Jake finished explaining, Ben was quiet for a long moment, staring at the golden sphere that pulsed gently in the center of the room. "If I do not do this, how many people will die when those things reach Earth?" Ben asked finally. "Everyone," Jake said simply. "Every human being in the galaxy will be consumed by the devourers, unless we can stop them." Ben nodded and placed both hands on the control panel. "Then let's do this." The awakening process was more intense than Jake remembered from his own transformation. Ben's body convulsed as his DNA rewrote itself, his nervous system sparking with new connections as dormant brain regions came online. Amy monitored his vital signs from a safe distance, ready to intervene if his heart stopped or his brain activity became dangerous. For 6 hours, Ben writhed on the floor of the engineering room while the Heritage's dawn pumped ancient genetic patterns into his cells. Jake stayed beside him, using his link with the ship to guide the process and ease the worst of the pain. Finally, as the sun rose over their position in space, Ben's body relaxed and his breathing became steady. When Ben opened his eyes, they glowed briefly with the same golden light as the sphere. He sat up slowly, looking around the room with new understanding. The symbols on the screens were no longer meaningless marks to him. He could read them, understand them, and more importantly, he could feel the Heritage's dawn responding to his presence. "I can feel the ship," Ben whispered in amazement. "It is like it is alive, like it is happy to have me here." Jake smiled and helped Ben to his feet. "Welcome to your true heritage, Ben Parker. You are no longer just a pilot. You are an architect, one of the builders of the galaxy." The transformation had been successful, but Ben was weak and needed time to adjust to his new abilities. Jake sent him back to their salvage ship to rest while he prepared for the next awakening. The process was working, but it was slow, and they did not have much time before the Devourer fleet arrived. Over the next month, Jake awakened 12 more crew members. Communications Officer Lisa Grant developed telepathic abilities that let her interface directly with quantum communication networks. Security Chief Tony Martinez gained enhanced physical strength and an instinctive understanding of architect. Weapons systems. Engineer Carol White could see and manipulate energy fields that were invisible to normal humans. Not all the transformations went well. Engineer Paul Stevens had genetic markers that seemed strong enough, but his bloodline had been too diluted by 10,000 years of random breeding. His body began the awakening process, but could not complete it. He fell into a coma that the Heritage's Dawn's medical systems could not reverse, and Jake was forced to watch his friend slip away, knowing that Paul's sacrifice had been necessary. But not wanting to accept it, each successful awakening made the Heritage's Dawn stronger and more responsive. The ship's systems that had been dormant for millennia came online one by one. Weapons that could crack planets powered up, shields that could withstand the assault of entire fleets activated, and sensors that could detect ships across half the galaxy began their sweep of nearby space. The awakened crew members brought their families aboard, testing children and spouses for the genetic markers that would allow them to join the Heritage's Dawn's growing complement. Jake found that people with activated bloodlines could awaken others more easily, and the process became faster and safer as they gained experience. But time was running out. Long-range sensors showed the Devourer advanced scouts spreading through the outer solar system, seeding asteroids and dead planets with parasitic organisms designed to weaken human resistance before the main fleet arrived. Mars colonies had gone silent, and the Jupiter mining stations were sending increasingly desperate distress calls. Jake stood on the Heritage's Dawn's bridge, surrounded by crew members who had awakened to their true heritage. The ship hummed. With power around them, its ancient systems fully active for the first time in 10,000 years. They had nearly 200 awakened humans now, enough to operate the ship at close to full capacity. But they were still just one ship facing an armada of thousands. Jake knew that there had to be other architect vessels hidden in the dark spaces between stars, waiting for crews to awaken them. The Heritage's Dawn could locate them, but only if they got close enough to the galactic core where the ancient shipyards had been built. "Captain," Lisa Grant said, her enhanced senses picking up quantum communications from across the solar system. "I am detecting massive energy signatures moving in from the outer system. The main Devourer fleet has arrived." "Ahead of schedule?" Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in that darkness, an enemy that had destroyed his people's empire was preparing to finish what it had started 10,000 years ago. The Heritage's dawn was ready for battle, its crew awakened to their true potential. But would one ship be enough to save humanity from the endless hunger that had consumed countless civilizations before them? "Signal the fleet," Jake ordered. "Tell them it is time to go home." The Heritage's dawn emerged from hyperspace above Earth to find the planet already under attack. Devourer bioships hung in orbit like massive tumors against the starfield, their living hulls pulsing with malevolent energy as they began the consumption process. Jake watched through the ship's sensors as Earth's defense fleets engaged the enemy, their primitive weapons having almost no effect on the alien vessels. "How long do our people have?" Jake asked Lisa Grant, who was monitoring communications. From across the solar system through her enhanced telepathic link with the quantum networks. "Mars went silent 6 hours ago," Lisa reported, her face pale with strain. "The Jupiter colonies are asking for immediate evacuation, but there are not enough ships to get everyone out. The Devourers are using some kind of biological weapon that turns people into part of their collective consciousness." Jake felt sick as he watched Earth's orbital defense stations being systematically destroyed. Each explosion represented hundreds of human lives snuffed out by an enemy that viewed them as nothing more than raw material to be processed and absorbed. The planet's surface was already showing signs of Devourer influence, with strange growths spreading across continents like a plague. "We have to do something," Ben Parker said from his position at the pilot's controls. His awakened abilities let him interface directly with the Heritage's Dawn's navigation systems. But even he looked overwhelmed by the scale of the battle happening around him. Jake nodded grimly. "Signal Earth Defense Command. Tell them we are here to help, but they need to pull their ships back. Our weapons are not designed to avoid friendly fire, and I do not want to accidentally destroy our own people." The response from Earth was immediate and hostile. Admiral Frank Coleman's voice crackled over the communication system, full of anger and desperation. "Unknown vessel, you are ordered to surrender immediately for inspection. We will not allow alien technology to operate in Earth space during this crisis." "Admiral, my name is Jake Morrison," Jake replied patiently. "I am human, as is my entire crew. This ship belongs to us, to all of humanity. We are here to fight the Devourers before they can consume our homeworld." "Impossible," Coleman snapped back. "No human technology could build a ship that size. You will surrender or be fired upon." Jake sighed and looked around the bridge at his awakened crew. They had hoped to work with Earth's military, but it was clear that the planet's leaders were too frightened and suspicious to accept help from what they saw as another alien threat. "Admiral, I am sending you data files that will explain everything," Jake said. "But right now, your people are dying while we argue. Let us help you." Coleman's response was to order the remaining Earth defense ships to target the Heritages. Dawn. Nuclear missiles streaked toward them through space, followed by energy beams that would have destroyed any normal vessel. Jake felt a moment of sadness for the waste of it all. Humans fighting humans, while their real enemy consumed their world. "Shields up," Jake ordered, "but do not return fire. They are our people, even if they do not understand what is happening." The Heritage's Dawn's defensive systems activated, creating energy barriers that made the incoming weapons simply disappear. The ship's shields were designed to stop weapons that could crack planets, so Earth's primitive missiles posed no threat at all. But Jake knew that every second they spent dealing with human attacks was another second this Devourers had to strengthen their hold on Earth. The decision was made for him when the main Devourer battle fleet arrived in the inner solar system. Massive bioships that dwarfed the Heritage's dawn dropped out of hyperspace, their living hulls already beginning to sprout the parasitic growths that would convert human ships into part of the Devourer. Collective. Jake watched in horror as Earth defense vessels were caught by Devourer capture beams. The human ships were pulled into the bioship's belly cavities, where their crews would be absorbed and their technology integrated into the enemy fleet. In minutes, the strongest human warships became weapons turned against their former allies. "That's enough," Jake said quietly. "Lisa, open a channel to all Earth forces. Let them hear what we really are." Jake stood and walked to the center of the bridge, his enhanced abilities letting him interface directly with the Heritage's Dawn's communication systems. When he spoke, his voice was broadcast to every human ship, station, and colony in the solar system. "People of Earth, my name is Jake Morrison, and I am here to tell you the truth about who you really are. We are not the primitive species you think we are. We are the descendants of the architects, the builders of a galactic empire that ruled the stars for millions of years. The creatures attacking us destroyed that empire 10,000 years ago, and we fled to Earth to hide from them." Jake's words were accompanied by data streams showing humanity's true history, images of the